The 472 counties that voted for Hillary Clinton, by contrast, accounted for 64% of America's economic output. This lopsided pattern can be made to fit the view that the us who were left behind by progress voted the smug beneficiaries of America's prosperity out of power. But that is hardly the whole story. It would be a historic mistake to gloss over the critical defining role of xenophobia in America's choice. It was not a freak event, not a bug in the system. The mix of contempt and resentment across frontiers of religion, race, ethnicity, and citizenship that anchored Trump's seduction of 63 million voters has distorted American politics since the birth of the nation. It defines who we are. You may call our condition racial hostility or simply racism. From America's slaveholder past through the Civil War and beyond, in the form of legal segregation across the Jim Crow South and de facto segregation across the urban North, the poll tax deployed to keep blacks from the polls, and campaigns against imagined voter fraud to purge blacks from the rolls, ethnic divisions, to give them a tamer name, have conditioned every turn in the development of the American state. Standing in the way of social trust, blocking solidarity, they have made us decidedly poorer. Upon those injustices, we have built the most exceptional country, one in which the most extreme wealth coexists comfortably with deprivation that has no place in the industrialized world. Trump's election might have exposed America's ethnic divisions to the unforgiving glare of the Klieg lights. But the uncomfortable questions raised by a president who likens immigrants to rapists ready to come for our women, who blocks Muslims from entering the country, who offers understanding to white supremacists marching torches in hand, coiled at the ready for a Nazi salute, have been lying in America's political underbrush for a long time. The very image of the United States as a melting pot, forged by the likes of Ralph Waldo Emerson and Henry James to evoke an exceptional culture built of a multiplicity of immigrant experiences bound into a national American identity, was ultimately a blinkered concept. Emerson might have dreamed of America as an asylum of all nations, where Africans and Polynesians contributed to create a new race, a new religion, and a new literature to replace the old Eurocentric paradigm. In fact, the crucible smelted only Americans of European stock. The term melting pot made its way into the American vernacular through Israel Zangwill's homonymous play, which opened at the Columbia in Washington, D.C. on October 5th of 1908. It's an ersatz Romeo and Juliet in which a Jewish Russian immigrant and a Christian Russian immigrant in New York overcome the vast historical and cultural chasm between them. Germans and Frenchmen, Irishmen and Englishmen, Jews and Russians, into the crucible with you all, trumpets the main character David Quijano. God is making the American. At the premiere, President Theodore Roosevelt, to whom Zangwill had dedicated the drama, is said to have shouted, "That's a great play." The indigenous communities living in the United States before all those Europeans arrived were not invited into the pot, though. Nor were the descendants of African slaves, or the brown Catholic Mexicans, from whom the United States had acquired about a third of its territory 60 years before. The American alloy certainly had no place for Chinese immigrants, who were prohibited from gaining American citizenship under the Chinese Exclusion Act. In 1924, 16 years after the debut of the melting pot, Congress passed restrictions limiting legal immigration from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. They would remain on the books until 1965. Over the last half-century or so, however, these disparate peoples, once excluded from the crucible, have come to define the de facto American. As a response, all those Americans of European stock who melted over the years into the contemporary concept of non-Hispanic white ditched the crucible metaphor and replaced it with a different organizing principle. To each his own. For years they circled the wagons, hoping to bar the non-white from the benefits of citizenship. When the Civil Rights Act stripped them of this ability, they set out to sabotage the collective American project. Donald Trump is merely a natural step in this progression. One of the most notable features of President Trump's victory was its whiteness. 62% of white men chose him, compared with 32% who voted for Clinton.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.